Hi everyone. We're continuing with our readings from C.S. Lewis's Mere Christianity, and we last left off with the question of how do we explain the law of human nature. So we're going to read from a chapter he heads, What Lies Behind the Law. He says, I now want to consider what this tells us about the universe we live in. Ever since man was able to think, they have been wondering what this universe really is and how it came to be there. And very roughly, two views have been held. First, there is what is called the materialist view. People who take that view think that matter and space just happen to exist and always have existed. Nobody knows why, and that the matter behaving in certain fixed ways has just happened by a sort of fluke to produce creatures like ourselves who are able to think. By one chance in 1,000, something hit our sun and made it produce the planets. And by another 1,000th chance, the chemicals necessary for life and the right temperature occurred on one of these planets. And so some of the matter on this earth came alive, and then, by a very long series of chances, the living creatures developed into things like us. The other view is the religious view. According to it, what is behind the universe is more like a mind than it is like anything else we know. That is to say, it is conscious and has purposes and prefers one thing to another. And on this view, it made the universe. Partly for purposes we do not know, but partly, at any rate, in order to produce creatures like itself. I mean like itself to the extent of having minds. Please do not think that one of these views was held a long time ago and the other has gradually taken its place. Wherever there has been thinking men, both views turn up. And note this too, you cannot find out which view is the right one by science in the ordinary sense. Science works by experiments. It watches how things behave. Every scientific statement in the long run, however complicated it looks, really means something like, I pointed the telescope to such and such a part of the sky at 2:20 a.m. on January 15 and saw so-and-so. Or, I put some of this stuff in a pot and heated it to such and such a temperature and it did so-and-so. Do not think I am saying anything against science. I am only saying what its job is. And the more scientific a man is, the more I believe he would agree with me on this is the job of science. And a very useful and necessary job it is, too. But why anything comes to be there at all, and whether there is anything behind the things science observes, something of a different kind, this is not a scientific question. If there is something behind, then either it will have to remain altogether unknown to men, or else make itself known in some different way. The statement that there is any such thing, and the statement that there is no such thing, are neither of them statements that science can make. The real scientists do not usually make them. It is usually the journalist and popular novelist who have picked up a few odds and ends of half-baked science from textbooks who go in for them. After all, it is really a matter of common sense. Supposing science ever became complete so that it knew every single thing in the whole universe, is it not plain that the questions, why is there a universe? Why does it go on as it does? Has it any meaning? Would remain just as they were. because these comments that Lewis is making here were presented on the radio initially, he added a few things to the book. So he has a note that he asked you to read about an in-between point of view. So here he says, I mentioned only the materialist view and the religious view, but to be complete, I ought to mention the in-between view called life force philosophy, or creative evolution, or emergent evolution. One reason why many people find creative evolution so attractive is that it gives one much of the emotional comfort of believing in God and none of the less pleasant consequences. When you are feeling fit and the sun is shining and you do not want to believe that the whole universe is a mere mechanical dance of atoms, it is nice to be able to think of this great mysterious force rolling on through the centuries and carrying you on its crest. If, on the other hand, you want to do something rather shabby, the life force, being only a blind force with no morals and no mind, will never interfere with you, like that troublesome God we learned about when we were children. The life force is a sort of tame God. You can switch it on when you want, but it will not bother you. All the thrills of religion and none of the cost. Is the life force the greatest achievement of wishful thinking the world has yet seen? That's a good question. Now, going back to the law of human nature, Lewis presents one helpful note, if you like. He says, now the position would be quite hopeless but for this. There is one thing, and only one, in the whole universe, which we know more about than we have learned from external observations. That one thing is man. We do not merely observe men, we are men. In this case, we have, so to speak, inside information. We are in the know. And because of that, we know that men find themselves under a moral law, which they did not make, and cannot quite forget, even when they try, and which they know they ought to obey. Notice the following point. Anyone studying man from the outside, as we study electricity or cabbages, not knowing our language and consequently not able to get any inside knowledge from us, but merely observing what we did, would never get the slightest evidence that we had this moral law. How could he? For his observations would only show what we did, and the moral law is about what we ought to do. So the next time we're going to talk about, if we accept this human this law of human nature, then something or someone is trying to get at us. But we'd have to ask the question of why, for what reason, to what purpose. So that's what we will talk about next time. This time I'm going to link to two videos that David did by James Orr. One is Genesis, the Fall of Man and the Theory of Evolution, and a second one that he did, which was Bible Doctrine of Man, or Christian Anthropology.